Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucy, and in today's video I wanted to talk to you about a topic that is probably one of my most requested videos to talk about, and that is the world of publishing. So today's video is to all of you guys who think you might want to get into book publishing or work in book publishing. So if you're new to my channel, you might not know, I have worked in publishing for over 6 years now. I'm currently a publicist at HarperCollins Publishers. It is a notoriously competitive field, so I wanted to give you guys 5 things you need to know about book publishing if you want to work in this industry. I've got quite a few videos all about publishing, so I will leave that playlist down in the description bar. There are quite a few in-depth videos about how to get into the industry, how to break in, how to nail your publishing job applications, things like that. Also, my personal story of how I got into the industry. So before we do crack on with the video, please do make sure you're subscribed to this channel for more videos like this. And also be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. All my details will be linked down below. So guys, I think without further ado, let's get on to the video and the 5 things you need to know if you want to work in book publishing. So I want to start number 1 with something a lot of people probably know, but in terms of job interviews and in terms of getting into the industry, it is crucial that you know this if you're going to apply and, you know, have successful job interviews, is that publishing is a business. So the main goal of book publishing is to make money. And I think often that gets overlooked because publishing is such a lovely industry and people on the whole generally love working in publishing and they love books. And that's what brings them into the industry, is their love of books. But what has to keep them there is knowledge that publishing is a business, like it works as a business and money does make the decisions in a lot of cases. So I think one thing to know, especially if you're going in for job interviews for publishing roles or if you're applying, is to know, you know, what books are the best sellers right now? What books are, you know, kind of word of mouth successes? What debuts have like completely smashed the bestseller charts? Things like that. Like having consumer knowledge of the book industry is really, really important for your job interviews, for your applications, and whilst you're in the role as well. Like if you just start out, you know, you're an assistant or in an entry-level position or an internship, having commercial awareness of what is doing well for this business right now, who are their brand authors, what titles are really kind of crucial for their budget. Often their budget won't be kind of public knowledge, like in terms of how many copies a publisher needs to sell to kind of meet the advance that they paid on that title. That's confidential information, obviously, but it is important to know what the big deals are for that book publisher that you're going into work for or you're working for. Having consumer awareness of the industry gives you an edge in terms of your applications and also helps you kind of understand how the many different roles in publishing all work together to create successes. And that brings me on to my next point, which is there is more to publishing than just editorial. So you will probably have seen this if you've watched my other videos about publishing, but there are so many departments in publishing, and editorial is obviously an important part. Editors acquire the books, they edit the books, they kind of are in charge of a book's overall strategy and what its route to market looks like. But the editor will obviously champion the book from the early stages. It's up to the other departments to kind of make the book what it is. So after editorial, it will usually go to places like the rights department where they'll sell foreign rights. They might sell serial rights, which is where an extract of a book will be sold to a newspaper. The finance department will be involved in the whole process, and finance is like a department that not many people talk about in publishing, obviously because you need to have probably done a finance degree or something like that. But it's also a really important department in a publishing house. And I've not even mentioned the other departments yet, so production. You see these gorgeous finishes on books, like production is key to that book becoming a book. You know, they know all about the finishes, they all know all about paper quality. They are just wizards in terms of getting the finished book out there and making it as beautiful as possible. The art department, who's obviously responsible for designing the covers, or in the case of like children's publishing or illustrated publishing, they design the interior of the books and, you know, the layouts and the beautiful illustrations and things like that. Other departments, obviously, I am biased because I work in the publicity department for my publisher, but publicity and marketing kind of work hand in hand, and they are kind of similar roles, but marketing is definitely more consumer focused in the sense of they are reaching direct to the consumer. So they work through placing adverts, digital adverts, social media, bloggers, influencers. They reach the consumer directly, and a lot of the tools that they have are paid for tools. And marketing budgets are often a lot bigger than PR budgets because PR is all about reaching people via another platform. At least that's how I see it. So what I'm talking about is, in my day-to-day job, I'm talking to journalists, I'm talking to media, I'm talking to, a load of different people, but usually I'm trying to get my books reviewed in newspapers, magazines, authors interviewed on, TV, radio, podcasts, things like that. We also work with bloggers as well, but bloggers is kind of like a grey area that's sometimes owned by a publisher's marketing department or sometimes owned by the PR department. Each one's quite different and each one has a different role, I guess. So what's the point of me telling you all this? A lot of this you might already know if you're looking to get into publishing. I just think that having an awareness of all the different roles in publishing is really, really crucial. You might really think that you want to get into editorial or marketing or publicity, and then you try out rights and you're like, oh, this is actually really fun and I really like doing this. So there are a lot of different roles in publishing, and I think it's really, really crucial to try a few out, or if you can't do that in the form of, internships, work experience, etc., do some research on those roles and, for example, Google it, YouTube it. There are lots of videos on, professionals in the industry talking about their day-to-day jobs and their roles that they have. So do some research, look into the different roles, and I think hopefully you will find that there is something for everyone, hopefully. The third thing that's important to know if you want to get into book publishing is you will be working on a lot of different projects at once. So the way publishing obviously works is we publish, a set amount of books per month. And usually in most roles in publishing, you will be working on books that came out last month, this month, and probably a year in the future. Like, you have to be thinking chronologically, but also at random different points. So you will be working ahead by quite a lot of months in terms of like forward planning, hitting deadlines, but you'll also be working on the books that are obviously coming out right now, and there's still work to be doing for those. So a key thing to note is having that forward-thinking mind, but also a reactive mind. And a lot of publishing is reactionary. So a lot of the trade publishers, which means trade publishers are basically publishers who will publish the books that you see in the shops. They're not academic publishers. They're kind of more commercial, and they'll publish books that you and me will buy in a bookstore or, a supermarket or something. Anyway, a lot of trade publishers are very reactionary. For example, if something happens in the news agenda, or, there's just a big moment and everyone's like, okay, there's this anniversary coming up, we need to publish something to tie in with this, or we need to reinvent a book that we've previously published and basically reissue it. So reissues are really common, especially around anniversaries. So I think it's important to remember that publishing is very reactionary, but we're also thinking months ahead and years ahead, especially in terms of like bigger brand campaigns, like those big brand authors that are just eternal bestsellers. Their campaigns are often planned years in advance. So it's important to have a kind of split mind. You need to be very, very organized, and you need to be very reactive and very, very flexible so that you can just roll with the punches. Okay, so my fourth point is an important one. It's about common presumptions of what somebody who works in publishing looks like. So there's a lot of work going on in terms of diversity in publishing and making publishing accessible to everyone. And a lot of publishers are doing a lot of work in terms of advertising that you don't necessarily need a degree to get into publishing. So there are a few publishing houses where you don't need a degree to apply. And I think that's really going in the right direction. Obviously, all these opinions are my own. They're not reflective of my publisher that I work for. But I really believe that, you don't really need a degree to work in publishing, but you do need relevant experience. So what I'm saying is, don't be fixated on that English degree. You do not need an English degree to work in publishing. You can have any degree. And I know loads of people who have, science degrees, maths degrees. Like, you don't need an English degree to work in publishing, and you don't need a publishing degree to work in publishing. A lot of people panic about doing a publishing master's after their initial degree, but I never did a publishing master's. I know a few people who've done publishing masters, but that necessarily didn't give them a proper edge. It probably prepared them more for the job because they know the ins and outs of publishing more so than I probably did at an entry-level role. But you don't need a publishing master's degree. And I think the most relevant thing you can do is just getting relevant experience. So working in a bookshop, working for a book festival, volunteering for a book festival, doing work experience and internships at a publishing house. This is actually my next point, so I won't go into this too much, but doing things that will give you an edge and is relevant to the role that you want to do is far more beneficial than getting a publishing master's degree. That's just my experience. If you have a publishing master's degree, don't panic thinking, what am I doing? I've wasted my time. You will be far more knowledgeable about a lot of things that probably other people will be. So I think it is worth doing in some situations, but what I'm trying to say is it isn't mandatory, and you won't be ruled out for a job interview if you don't have a publishing master's degree. So I just wanted to say that, it's important to note. And my fifth and final point is all about internships. So the publishing industry's kind of changed from when I went into publishing, and I think I've spoken about this in my other videos. When I was applying for entry role positions in publishing, you needed work experience, and quite a lot of work experience. I remember like some people advising 6 weeks of work experience in a publishing house. Now, thinking about that now, like I didn't have that when I secured my entry-level job as a publicity assistant. I had a month's work experience, and it was a whole month block. It wasn't like, you know, a week here, a week there. It was a whole month at a top 5 publisher, and I was very, very lucky to get that. One thing that's interesting to note is back then when I was applying, which isn't even that long ago, like 7 years ago or something, a lot of those roles were unpaid, and they usually paid for travel or a subsidiary for like lunch or whatever. And there has been a lot of justified outcry about unpaid internships, unpaid work experience placements, and rightly so, because it really does limit, you know, the people that you attract to that role. Luckily, I was in a situation where I had a friend who lived in London at the time. If I didn't have that friend who was only working in London for a year as part of her placement year at university, I would not have been able to do any internships because I was from the northeast of England and my family couldn't afford to really put me up in a hotel for a month or kind of rent a place for me for the month. So I don't really know what I would have done and how easy it would have been for me to get into publishing if I didn't have a connection of someone who lived in London at the time and was kind enough to let me stay with them. So luckily the industry has moved into paying people for internships, and it does mean they are slightly more competitive because there are only obviously certain amount of funds available for internships. But it does mean you are getting more for what you are doing in terms of the internship. So often those internships will no longer be go photocopy this, go make the coffee. It's always a good idea to make the coffee and always volunteer to make the tea round. That's like my #1 advice in general. Even I think it's still beneficial when you've been working in publishing for 6 years. Always make the tea round. Anyway, I'm going off piece. What I'm trying to say is now that these positions are paid for, you know, they really need to make sure that they are paying you to do actual really good work. So often you'll find these internships are more kind of like assistant level, so they give you a real taste of what a job in publishing will look like. And that's really valuable, I think. There are also a lot of schemes like BAME schemes that only kind of target, you know, Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups to apply for certain roles just because, you know, BAME groups are really underrepresented in the publishing industry, and I think that's really, really important. So do look out for schemes like that, and you'll find most publishers have something like that, just to kind of help people get a foot into the industry. Another thing to look for is the Spare Room Project. So what the Spare Room Project is it helps people who don't have a place to stay and they want to do internships or work experience in London. And I think they just have a website that you can just apply for a place to stay. I think they're usually for free as well. Like, I don't think you have to pay for anything. Usually it's just a lot of lovely people who have a spare room, just be like, you know what, stay in the spare room for a month or whatever you need. So if you do have an internship lined up and you're worried about where to stay, look into the spare room project. A lot of publishing companies also have connections in terms of like, you know, places to stay. They might be able to give you an allowance of like, you know, to rent a place somewhere for a month or whatever. So these are obviously really valuable resources, and I'm very, very pleased that a lot of publishers are really helping people who aren't from London, you know, really kind of be welcomed into the industry like that. And in terms of like, you know, if you're really struggling to secure internships, it is really hard, especially right now when there's a global pandemic. A lot of publishing companies are not in the office right now. I have been working from home since March, and it's likely I'm going to be working from home until there's kind of a way out of this pandemic. But anyway, what I wanted to say is, yes, it's extremely competitive right now for internships and work experience. Don't give up hope. Just try and apply for anything you can see, even if it's in a role that you don't really want to get into. So say it's for a rights position or a sales position, and you're like, you know what, I don't want to get into sales or rights, I want to get into marketing, or I want to get into finance, whatever. Just apply for that, because as soon as you get a foot in the door, as soon as you get a taste of what publishing is like, you will make connections, and you can ask your employer or whoever is managing you through your internship, oh, could I have a taster session, or could I have a day in this department? Once you're in, it's easier to kind of segue between departments. I know loads of people who start out in one department and end up working in a completely different department. And I think just apply. Do not give up hope. It is really hard right now. You just need to do things as well that will really help your cause. You know, set up that blog, set up that Bookstagram, you know, volunteer for things if you can. Obviously the pandemic is kind of a barrier right now. Don't give up hope if you are applying for internships or applying for jobs in publishing. It will be okay, and you will get there. You just have to keep going. And I sympathize. I lost hope a lot of times when I was applying for my entry role 6.5 years ago, but I got there in the end, and I'm very, very happy that I'm still working in publishing today. So guys, feel free to leave me any questions in the comments, and also feel free to tweet me at BookBellReads or on Instagram at Luz Richardson. I am always happy to answer your questions, and I know how hard it is to get in, so I'm always here as a resource if you need, you know, some advice. And don't forget to watch the other videos that I've made on publishing, so you can get an even broader understanding of like what I've done to get in, and you know, some helpful tips. So guys, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate you clicking on this video. And if you're new, please do stick around and hit that subscribe button. So guys, all my socials are down in the description bar, and I will leave that playlist that I mentioned of all my helpful publishing videos. I hope you're all having a great week, and I'll see you very, very soon for my next video, guys. Bye.